Welcome back. Still tuned in to Salam Media, and in a bit we'll be diving into a significant development in Palestinian politics. On July 23rd, 2024, Palestinian factions Hamas and Fatah, along with 12 other groups, signed a landmark unity agreement in Beijing, China. This deal, which also involves the establishment of an interim national reconciliation government, represents a crucial step towards governance in Gaza. That's ongoing genocide, and also post the current conflict. The agreement, facilitated by China, underscores a major shift in Palestinian political dynamics. And joining us in a bit to unpack this development is Jeenah, senior researcher at the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection, and is also an expert in international relations. Naeem, thank you so much for joining us and giving us your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. I think first and foremost, one thing that maybe you can start by unpacking is just the significance of these two groups, Hamas and Fatah, and just the kind of impact and influence they have on Palestinian politics, particularly in the ongoing genocide that is perpetuated by the Israeli occupying forces.
Well, among all the Palestinian factions, 14, as you said, were in Beijing to sign that agreement. These are the two largest. Hamas won parliamentary elections, if we might call it a parliament, under occupation in 2006. And Fatah's president or leader, Mahmoud Abbas, won presidential elections, if we might call it a president, in 2005. Since then, he has refused to call either presidential or parliamentary elections because he's afraid that he and his party might lose again, as they did in 2006 to Hamas. So these are the two largest groups. One significant difference between them in terms of their policy is that Hamas believes that resistance to the occupation, and including armed resistance, is the path towards liberation of the Palestinian people. Fatah believes that, or at least Mahmoud Abbas's Fatah believes, because there are more than one Fatah in a sense, or more than one faction within Fatah, believes that the only way towards Palestinian liberation is negotiations, which of course has yielded nothing, and there have been no negotiations in the past few years. And the reason I say different factions within Fatah, because in the current context of the genocide taking place in Gaza, one of the armed factions involved in the resistance to Israeli occupation forces is the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades, which is linked to Fatah. So these are the two biggest ones, and then the other smaller groups were present as well.
I think one thing that a lot of people will be interested in is what this unity agreement entails. I think you mentioned about the two opposing ideologies when it comes to Palestine and how it maneuvers this ongoing genocide and occupation by Israeli occupying forces. The two organizations themselves, they differ in ideology. This unity agreement, what does it entail, and what does it mean, for the broader future of the governance of Gaza going forward?
So, firstly, it's not as unprecedented as some people are making it sound. Similar agreements have been signed before and have just not been upheld by Abbas and Fatah. Similarly, there's been talks from 2005 of Hamas being included in the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and Fatah has ensured that it is kept out. So the deal itself is not, or the agreement itself is not completely unprecedented, not as landmark as some are making it out to be. Secondly, what it is not is, it's not about the governance of Gaza. It talks about a unity government that will replace the Palestinian Authority, a unity government that will govern the West Bank and Gaza, not just Gaza. So certainly Gaza is part of that, but it's not just about Gaza. This is more than that, and talks in broader terms about unity. A few months ago, there were talks in Moscow at which there was an agreement that Hamas and Islamic Jihad, the two of the 14 factions that are not members of the PLO, that these two factions would be included into the PLO. Nothing has happened since. In fact, very soon after that, Fatah issued a statement accusing Hamas of being responsible for the genocide in Gaza, and everything fell flat there. So, in a sense, what is happening now is a rehash of what happened in Moscow. Do we expect that this will yield different results? I don't know. I mean, I think many Palestinians are hopeful, but if previous experience is anything to go by, once the Fatah delegation goes back to Ramallah, Mahmoud Abbas will basically squash the piece of paper and move on as if life is as it was 3 days ago.
I think the biggest critic when it comes to the liberation of Palestine and the shortcoming thereof is from a lot of analysts and researchers who mirror Palestine to South Africa, saying the lack of a unified organization that resembled maybe what South Africa had in the ANC. Is kind of maybe one of the shortcomings when it comes to the liberation of Palestine. Would you agree with this? And would just the different factions within Palestine itself be maybe one of the Achilles' heels when it comes to seeking liberation for the Palestinian people and their cause?
Firstly, I think it's a misunderstanding of South African history. The ANC wasn't akin to the PLO. The PLO is a coalition of various groups, 12 or so different groups. The ANC was one organization among many. So you also had the PAC, the Pan-Africanist Congress. You also had the Black Consciousness Movement, both inside the country and in exile. And there wasn't a common platform on which they all stood. There wasn't a PLO equivalent in South Africa. So, those of us who are old enough remember that in the 1980s, those of us in different of these groups were literally killing each other in our townships. And I'm not talking about Inkatha, which was a collaborationist organization collaborating with the apartheid state. I'm talking about these groups, ANC, or the Congress movement, which includes the ANC, South African Communist Party, the Congress movement on the one hand, the Black Consciousness movement on the other hand, the Africanist movement on the other hand. We had in our townships no-go areas where people from one of these groups would not be able to go into an area that was dominated or controlled by the other. So this notion that all Black people supported liberation and we all had a common platform is not true about South Africa. And then we misunderstand our history or misportray our history, and then we want to impose that misunderstood history onto the Palestinians. So I don't think that it's a necessity or requirement for liberation of a people that all its liberatory forces need to be united into one organization. I don't think that that's necessary. I don't know that there ever has been a case where that was true. I mean, look at Algeria in its struggle against the French. There were different organizations. There might have been one that was dominant, but they were different organizations. So we shouldn't be imposing that notion on the Palestinians. I do think that one issue is that Palestinians don't come across as having a common vision. So in the South African case, for example, on the international stage, whether you were Africanist or Black consciousness or Congress, you supported a single, united, democratic, non-racist or anti-racist, depending on your ideological leanings, South African state. If you ask different Palestinian groups, they have different ideas. And I think that some work needs to be done on unifying their vision and strategy. As I said earlier on, even between the two largest groups, Hamas and Fatah, the strategy for liberation is vastly different. One believes in only negotiations, the other believes mainly in armed resistance, and those two are different. But to suggest that until they are united, whatever that might mean, they will not move forward, I think is a misrepresentation of our history and a misunderstanding of how liberation struggles are waged.
I want to focus a bit on China. What role did China play in facilitating this agreement, and what does this say about China's position in the Middle East, particularly when it comes to this ongoing genocide?
Well, I mean, the agreement was, in a sense, China's doing, China's work. It's an interesting development because up to a year or so ago, China has always had a kind of hands-off approach to foreign issues, foreign conflicts, etc. Its position has been that it will not get involved in other people's conflicts. It will not get involved in internal matters of other states, etc. And that reflected not only in the way it didn't get involved, but also in the way it positioned itself in the UN Security Council, where it's a permanent or non-elected member. But a year ago, it brokered a deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia, which was a significant deal, and in a sense began to break from that tradition of how it deals with foreign issues. And now we're seeing this intervention. I mean, if it works, this is a very important intervention. Even if it doesn't, it's significant that China is doing this, indicating that China is now believing that it does have a role, or that it should be playing a role on the international stage in different conflicts, etc. And certainly have started with the Middle East, with Saudi Arabia and Iran last year, and the Palestinians now. So I think this is significant. We might see China flexing those kinds of muscles in other global contexts as well moving forward.
And just lastly, before I let you go, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is currently visiting the United States, and this comes after Joe Biden, saying he won't be standing in this year's election. Any significance to that his visit to America? What can we make of it?
Well, to a large extent, it's about himself. It's about saving himself by portraying himself on the Israeli domestic scene as having the support of the United States, a United States that is very fractured at the moment, and being able to claim that even as fractured as it is, he has the support of both sides of that. So that's the one. The second thing is that he wants to do the kind of thing that he's been trying to do, and he has tried to do before when Obama was president, for example, of influencing American politics with an election coming up soon. But it's all very much about himself. It's not even about the Israeli people, certainly not about the captives that are being held in Gaza, which is the big demand of most Israelis at the moment, that he must work towards having those captives released by making a deal with the Gaza resistance. I mean, Netanyahu in Israel at the moment has a popular is unpopular, I should say, with more than 70% of the population. So this is about saving his political skin and keeping him out of jail, which is a big thing. He's got 3 cases against him in Israel at the moment. And finally, of course, the possibility of warrants being issued soon by the International Criminal Court against him and others. And again, he wants to win American support for keeping him out of that prison as well.
Thank you so much, Naeem. Jeenah, I think we're going to leave it there. Really, really appreciate your insights into the conversation that we just had right now. And I'm sure as it unfolds, we'll definitely be linking up with you to further unpack some of the international relations, particularly when it comes to Gaza and Palestine. But we're going to leave it here for now.
Thank you.
That was Naeem Jeenah, senior researcher at the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection, and also an expert in international relations, just giving us insight on that significant development in Palestinian politics. Palestinian factions, Hamas and Fatah, along with 12 other groups, signing a landmark unity agreement in Beijing. This deal, which involves the establishment of an interim national reconciliation government, represents what many call a crucial step towards governance of Gaza post-conflict, but as Naeem says, it might not yield the results that a lot of people might be expecting, and it might border into inconsequential if Fatah has anything to go by it. We're going to leave it here. It's been another insightful show. Thank you so much for giving us your time, and thank you so much to my team. Abdul Salam on the board, and also the senior producer of News and Views, Nasreen Naidu. We're going to be with you again tomorrow morning on the Thursday edition of News and Views. From myself, Salalo Makwidiri. Goodbye.